My name is Rick Gatteau, and I work at Stony Brook University. I just started my 16th year at the university, and in my career path, I actually graduated from college almost 25 years ago, and I earned my degree in business management. Thought I would go the corporate route, and did for a bit, working in retail and at a law firm, and realized it was not the right fit. So I had reflected back, going to my mentors at my undergrad, where I went at Bucknell, and they said, well, you were really involved in college, why not a career in student affairs? And I never really quite knew that it was a true profession, because I always joke thinking that you go to college to leave college and not to come back. And so I applied at some recommended schools and wound up getting admitted to the University of Vermont, and had an amazing 2-year experience there as a graduate hall director. And so I wound up then continuing in residential life while pursuing my doctorate. Then I switched to working at Columbia University. I worked then in academic advising, switched over in that area, and then now came to Stony Brook in 2002 as director of academic advising, and have since expanded my role to oversee our orientation area, academic success and tutoring, our academic integrity area, advising, and really a main focus on student success. I think academic success, it's a little bit of a loaded term, and so my official title at Stony Brook is Associate Provost for Academic Success. And that's, I would say, within the last 5 years, a title that's come onto the scene. When you look at higheredjobs.com, that's become a little bit more prevalent. For me, the success truly is defined in many ways by the student and what they're seeking to achieve through their college experience. I would like you to look back on your experience and have no regrets. And by that, I always mean, be a sponge, absorb information, set important goals for yourself, and work to achieve those goals. So for me, the success is it's a balance. It's an academic success, doing well in your curriculum. This is probably what I think college used to always be about: become an educated citizen. That's an important goal. But it's also to balance your academic part with involvement, your resume building, whether it's study abroad, an internship, really balancing and I would say building a portfolio for yourself. And I know a term in higher ed programs is you learn about best practices. And I think that's really important, because we don't operate on an island in terms of our work. I know within Stony Brook, we're part of the SUNY, the State University of New York system. So we're one of 4 SUNY centers. And so we do have close collaborations with our colleagues in those areas, because we're all ultimately aiming for the same goal. So I would argue there's probably some healthy competition in terms of seeing what other schools are doing. The finish in 4 mantra, that's really become pronounced at a lot of colleges. Or you'll hear us say 15 to finish, because you're doing 15 credits a term over 8 semesters to graduate. So there's some of these are, I don't want to call them marketing gimmicks, but some of them are marketing to students and families to demonstrate the value of higher education, that we have a pathway for you to graduate. So that's been, I think, positive. One of the things I've always said in my career, and this has changed dramatically, is that I think technology has influenced a lot of our work, and actually has brought a lot of our colleges more collectively working together, because when you can look at data sources at other schools and say, here's what's proven that works, you can share that with other schools and say, your school might be a little bit different based upon the profile of the students, but there might be some pieces of data that are relevant to the work that you do. So years ago, my kind of metaphor is that you were throwing darts on a dartboard. And you'd say, well, I think this program or initiative might work, but it was very hard to measure results. And I think nowadays we have much more sophisticated methods and models to use to actually apply to your school to see if they're being successful. Assessment and accountability have, I think, again, are loaded terms. In the past, I don't think they were really even in higher ed vocabulary. If I harken back to a decade or two ago, I think the word on the scene was evaluation. So when you think about an employee, there might be a performance evaluation, there might be a course evaluation. So that kind of was the standard. Now we've evolved into the term of assessment, because part of, I think, the goal of changing the terminology is to figure out, assess what you're doing well, but to try to do, it's really a process of continual improvement. So I think there's a difference between evaluation saying, here's where we are, and okay, whereas assessment, I think the goal is for it to be a more positive influence to do better. But here's where I'd say assessment and accountability align each other, for better or for worse. And to talk about really maybe separate accountability, how that came on the scene. In my 25-year career in higher education, years ago, when I was even in college, there was the start of a conversation about the cost of higher education, meaning the dollar amount you're spending. And I would argue that even during maybe the early, even up to the early to mid 90s, there was a I think a general societal view that college itself is worth it. It's worth the money you invest. You become cultured, you become educated, you are ready to join society and do well and get a job, and the economy would support that. I think the shift has happened over time then where external forces from higher education, whether it's government, legislators, parents, all the other stakeholders outside of higher ed and media, they started looking in saying, wait a minute, when you look at the chart and the graph of how costs have escalated dramatically over a 10 or 20-year period, people start questioning the value of investment, saying if I'm going to spend X amount of money, what's the return on that investment? And again, for families, it becomes even more pronounced that they want the job, they want money. So it's somewhat has cut to the core, I think, of what higher education itself values it to be, which is we're here to educate you. So this whole word accountability started emerging where people said, well, wait, you've kind of gone unchecked. Whereas, the K to 12 environment had always been kind of watch whether at the state or federal level. Higher ed had really gone unchecked. And now what's happening is higher education is under the microscope, I think, more than ever. And what's fascinating is that accountability is coming into play related to assessment in a couple fronts. One is middle states or other evaluations. So for Stony Brook, we're in the middle states area. And so when we get the evaluations, there an incredible amount of our rating and even ranking is based upon the value of our assessment method. So what are we doing to continually improve and do better? Like, in other words, outside stakeholders are asking higher ed to prove that students learn, to prove that students have an understanding of concepts, that to prove level of knowledge and skill, as opposed to just saying you have a diploma. But now, if you look at even within New York State, and we have the tuition assistance program, Governor Cuomo's new Excelsior program in New York, and even within federal government Pell Grants, there's a lot more tied to students needing to do certain things to receive that aid, which in turn requires the universities to do more to make sure that students get that aid as well. So it's very, very different than it has ever been before, where I feel like we're a bit more beholden to external forces to say, okay, we are now holding you accountable. And I'm not saying higher ed used to always be in a bubble, and I don't think that's a healthy situation, but in many cases, higher ed has now, that bubble has burst, and we need to be much more accountable. So for anybody who wants to join the field, obviously, I'm an advocate. I absolutely love the field of higher education. In terms of internally, it's changed dramatically in that higher ed really used to be focused on strictly faculty and students. And now with the emergence, and really, I think when you look at national associations like ACP and NASPA and just the numbers of members and conferences and development opportunities, higher ed has really expanded much more. There are so many niche areas that provide support to students depending upon what the need is, whether it's disability support or counseling or advising, career. There are lots of different areas that I think have existed in some senses, but not to the degree or depth that they are now.